Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. We have shown on several occasions in the past how the SNP are economically illiterate. And if anything needs to underline this and enforce it, it is news today that Humza yousaf is looking to raise income tax again. Having already raised it to above England levels twice, they're now looking to do it for a third time, putting punitive taxes on those who are fortunate enough to earn more than £40,000 a year. Now, for some, that sounds like a lot of money, but for anyone who is in any way a professional or, a tradesman, that is not a high wage. That is not a high threshold before you start paying far more money for the problems caused by the SNP. This could well cause professionals to leave the country. If you've got someone, a doctor, for example, who's finding his tax bill effectively doubling, why would he stay? He could go south of the border, do the same hours, do the same job, but save even more of his own money. It's madness, of course, but then it's the SNP. You don't expect any kind of political sense, especially when you see what they've done to increase the rate of poverty by deliberate policy, it seems. Let's have a look at this report. So Humza yousaf plots a fresh tax grab on hard-working Scots to pay for SNP failure. Well, I'd put an S on the end of that. Failures. There have been many. The SNP leader, they're using the word leader quite incorrectly there though, aren't they? The SNP leader has already indicated support for hiking tax again for those earning over £40,000 to 43%. And has been accused of pandering to Scottish Greens. Now, in England, the threshold is much higher than 40,000, and at 40,000, you only pay 40%. So what they're doing is they're lowering the threshold to £40,000 and increasing the taxable amount of that by 3% over the English rate. It is madness if he does this and expects to keep professionals in Scotland. But then the man is a buffoon. Humza yousaf is plotting a fresh tax grab on hard-working Scottish families in an attempt to pay for the SNP's failures to address child poverty. The First Minister wants to hammer middle earners in a move that would widen the tax gap between Scotland and the rest of the UK, and thus encourage high earners and skilled professions to run for the border. He admitted officials were looking at what taxes could be created or increased to fund more benefits. He made the announcement at a poverty summit in Edinburgh, during which he admitted the nationalist government had failed to make an impact on tackling child poverty during their 16 years of power. That is an amazing thing. You've just read it there. They've admitted they've failed. They've never admitted that before. Sturgeon would never have admitted she'd failed to do anything about child poverty. She'd have said that the Westminster government has allowed these children to suffer. So it goes to show the times they are a-changing. But 16 years of SNP governance, I mean, again, that word carries a lot more weight than it should in that sentence, has led to an increase in child poverty. But that's not the only poverty. Figures released last month revealed poverty levels had stalled at around 24% since the SNP came to power in 2007, with critics labelling it Nicola Sturgeon's devastating legacy, amongst many others. And last month it was reported that very deep poverty has risen by almost 50% under the SNP's watch. 16 years of SNP control. I'm not going to say, government, because they've not governed. 16 years of SNP malgovernment, malfeasance, ineptitude, stupidity, criminality, call it what you will. 16 years. And deep poverty has increased by 50%. That is the main problem with the SNP. And I think the worst of it is that many of those people who are sitting in that deep poverty will still vote for the SNP. They're getting what they deserve, almost, And I'm not saying anyone deserves poverty, but I mean, if you keep voting these fools in, what do you expect? According to reports in the Scottish Daily Mail, he said, we need to make sure we are looking at taxation, making tough decisions where necessary. Well, I've got an idea. Why don't you cut MPs' wages and MSPs' wages in half? There you go. That'll save a lot of money. You can use that to fund things, can't you? The point of this summit, he says, is to see what is more that we can do in our gifts and our powers. Well, you've had plenty of gifts, haven't you? Motorhomes, expensive pens, that sort of thing. I don't think you should be talking about gifts. And that's where we have to look at taxation. That's where we have to look at targeted measures. That's where we have to look at those tough decisions that we've got to make as a government in using our devolved powers to the absolute maximum. In other words, I want to tax the vaguely comfortable, not even the rich, the vaguely comfortable. He wants to tax them until the pips squeak. Mr. Yousaf went on to say it was not good enough for Nats to say we don't control the reserve policy levers. But the paper reports he then went on to blame the Tories, Brexit and the COVID pandemic. Well, of course he's going to blame them. It's 16 years of SNP at control with their own financial policies, and he's blaming Brexit, COVID and, of course, the Tories. The Tories aren't controlling taxation. The Tories aren't controlling the spending. The Tories don't control education, the NHS or transport. That's all down to you, Humza Yousaf. Look at your own record. Look at the record of your government. This has got nothing to do with Brexit, nothing to do with the Tories. And if the COVID has done anything, and is any way to blame, it's because of that mad woman, Nicola Sturgeon, who wanted to push for absolute control over people by closing this, closing that, forcing masks on children, blah, 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 blah. All the things she did that have proved to be unnecessary subsequently. Anyway, speaking at a Scottish Trade Union Congress in April, Mr. Yousaf claimed he was very keen to look at the union's proposals to introduce a new 44% tax rate for those earning about $75,000 and also the lower threshold for the higher rate, bringing it down to $40,000 and hiking tax above that level to $43,000. The current situation sees everyone earning more than $28,750 a year pay more income tax than those south of the border. Those on salaries above $43,662 have already been hit by tax rises this month. Basically, what they're saying is, at the moment, if you're 43,000 and above, you pay an extra 2% over what you pay in England. He wants to increase that to an extra 3%, and he wants to reduce the threshold from 43,000 to 40,000. Now, that would be enough for some people to pack up their bags and move south of the border. And if you are someone who lives, in the borders, Dumfries, something like that, there's nothing stopping you going 20, 30 miles south of the border. You can still do what you want. You can still pay yourself, but pay yourself in England. And they're going to lose a lot of skilled people. They're going to lose a lot of tradesmen. They're going to lose their tax base because that tax will be paid to the Westminster, ironically, it will still come through Cumbernauld, but it will be paid to the Westminster government's monies, not to the Scottish National Party's own government's monies. And so they're going to lose so much money and people will leave. But the trouble with the SNP is that they don't understand the basic tenets of economics or of people. And they need to be educated. They need to be sat in a room with a teacher with a long stick pointing at a board and tapping it and showing them a Laffer curve and explaining why Laffer curves are so important and why they just don't get it. Anyway, I shall come up and we'll round off. So there we are. The economic illiteracy of Humza Yousaf and the SNP in general is on further show. You cannot keep taxing people and expect them to put up with it when there is very, very simple ways for them to avoid paying that tax. And you keep taxing, first of all, the very rich, then the middle classes. Now you're taxing effectively working classes. And all that money that's being raised is being funneled to the bottom. Now, nobody's saying you don't need to put money in at the bottom. Absolutely you do. 100% you do. You do need to lift people up. That, to do anything else would be, cruel, I think. But you cannot expect to keep tapping the top to fill up the bottom, because people will leave. People who have the means to go will go, and you, by increasing tax bases like that, increasing tax rates, by decreasing thresholds, you provide stronger and stronger impetus for them to do something about it. And the very simplest thing for them to do is move to England, Wales or Northern Ireland, where they will pay far less tax for the same job. But it's very hard to get this into the minds of people who are absolute morons. Now, there are other ways of raising tax that don't affect people's ability to have an income. You can tax specific things. You could put, for example, a tax on oil distribution. You could put a tax on imports. You can put a tax on so many different things. And you make them spend taxes, not earning taxes, so that people who buy things pay more rather than people who work pay more. And that would encourage, by having lower working taxes, would encourage people to work harder because they're going to keep more of their money. And it reduces consumption because people are like, well, the prices are a little bit higher now, I won't spend as much. But if they've got that cash, then they invest, they save, and those monies go into investing in infrastructure in other ways. You increase your tax base by reducing your income tax. This is the principle of the Laffer curve. And it is one of the first things that you learn when you do any form of economics. You know, I mean, I remember doing them. I think the first thing you do is opportunity cost, supply and demand, and then tax base of Laffer curves and things like that. It is very, very simple. You know, economics 101. Somebody should arrange for all politicians of all parties to go and take a basic economics lesson, just so they understand the realities of life. Because otherwise they're going to keep doing stupid things that ultimately will harm people and destroy the economy. And I'll finish there. Thank you very much for listening. If you like what you see here on the channel, please hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video, but mainly please leave the like. That's the really important one. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, just be careful not to earn more than £40,000 if you live in Scotland, and goodbye.